Hello, and welcome to Believe in Aliens, a podcast that celebrates the extraordinary journeys of people who leave everything they know behind to build towards a bigger purpose. Today, we're joined by Tony Martens, CEO and co-founder of Plantible Foods. Tony and his co-founder, Maurice van de Ven, came to the United States from the Netherlands with a vision to disrupt the world food supply. Plantible's approach to creating a sustainable protein source from Lemna represents a fundamentally different way of thinking about our food. In this episode, we'll explore four things. One, how Tony's working to deliver a full protein sourced entirely from plants, how he and his co-founder moved into a Breaking Bad-like trailer during the pandemic, the mission Tony is on to disrupt the food supply chain, and number four, how he navigates cultural differences, balancing American confidence with global humility, all while looking down at us from his 6'7" stature. 6'8" stature. Get ready to have your perspectives challenged and to believe in the power of those who see the world a little differently. Tony, welcome to the podcast. Where are you right now?
Thank you for having me. I am actually at home in San Diego. That's where I am right now. Yeah.
Not in your farm in Texas, I see.
So I came back late last night. So I got home at around 1 a.m., something like that. But it's in Texas yesterday. You should come and visit us. Yeah, you'll enjoy it.
We'll make that day happen. All right, so here's what's coming up for me. We've all listened to podcasts, and one of the things that we all know is this is really about the person listening. And I'm thinking about three specific types of people right now. For the person walking, look around you. Do you see any plants on the ground, a weed? Imagine that plant could give you all the protein you ever imagined. For the person driving, think about the time that you drove past a farmland and all you could smell is the smell of methane gas from cows. Imagine if that smell was replaced by the aromatics of Lemna. And for the person working out, imagine if you got all your protein and you could do that with a protein that tasted good and didn't have a byproduct and no inflammation. All of those are possible with Lemna, and you'll pay less than eggs. That's what we're going to talk about today. Tony, with that, what is Lemna? What is RubisCO? And what do you mean when you say it's a complete or full protein?
Yeah, great questions. Thank you for setting the stage here. Yeah, so let's start with RubisCO. So I think that's working backwards from what customers or consumers need. So I think RubisCO is the enzyme that is the catalyst in the photosynthesis process. So its role in nature is to capture CO2 and convert it to sugars that plants have so that plants can grow. You can actually find it in every leafy green on the planet, and it's therefore one of the most abundant and arguably widely consumed proteins in the world.
Wait, so every leafy green, like spinach?
Yeah,
lettuce?
Spinach, lettuce, kale, all of those. When you eat those, you're actually already indirectly consuming a little bit of RubisCO. And not every leafy green is created equal, of course, but to make you aware, if you eat leafy greens, you're already eating that protein. And obviously, if you look at the animal kingdom, arguably the strongest animals consume RubisCO as their main source of protein. Whether it's an elephant or a gorilla, their main sources of protein generally come from leafy greens, and clearly it helps.
You're making me think about something that happened on a Netflix documentary where they talked about why are we eating the middleman? The strongest animals are vegan, vegetarian.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing, and we can talk about it for hours, right? So I think the whole middleman, I think it's like if you feed ingredients or feedstock to a machine, all of it needs to be labeled. This is what I fed the machine. This is what I fed the machine. But if you feed it to an animal, you don't have to list what you fed the animal. It's just, this is animal that we're eating. So I think this is a whole interesting paradigm in the food space where, if you dive one step deeper and you look at why did avian flu suddenly spread from chickens to cattle, and you realize that they feed cattle chicken litter. But how often do you buy, let's say, a piece of steak and it's said on the ingredient label, chicken litter? It doesn't. Whereas if you were to feed that chicken litter to a machine, obviously you would have to label it. But yeah, you're right. Sorry for that sidestep. But coming back to RubisCO, if you think about RubisCO, catalyst photosynthesis process, most widely consumed protein, one of the least allergenic proteins as it stands today in our food system, and also very nutritionally complete. And when I say nutritionally complete, like your body produces certain amino acids, and then there are amino acids that you need to source from other food products, and these are called essential amino acids. So you need to consume them on a daily basis in order to be able to get your
for most people, how they would understand that is that when you think about a chicken, is that the full amino acid profile? Is that in the egg that we eat that the chicken laid? Where are we getting some of these full amino acid profiles? Or are we just drinking protein shakes till we're fully consumed?
Yeah, it's a good question. So generally, we use a lot of the animal proteins. They have all of the essential amino acids at the recommended daily intake levels. Some of the plant proteins, most of the plant proteins do not have them. That's why you often see, if you buy, let's say, a plant protein powder mix, that it's a blend of multiple proteins so that they can balance out, let's say, the essential amino acids. But RubisCO, funnily enough, does have all of these essential amino acids that the human body needs at the right recommended daily intake levels. Actually, at such a level that if you were to only consume protein from a single source, RubisCO would be the most efficient source to get your recommended daily essential amino acids from. And the reason for that is twofold. So the FAO, so the World Food and Agriculture Organization, has done a plethora of studies to really understand what essential amino acids you need to consume at what level. And if you compare what RubisCO contains, or at least our RubisCO contains, it has the best composition compared to any of the other proteins on the market. But then also on top of that, based on our bioavailability or digestibility studies, it actually showed that it's a more digestible or bioavailable protein than any of the animal and plant proteins on the market today, which then also means that,
Does that mean that when we consume it, more of the protein goes into our body?
Easier. Yeah. So if you think about, let's say,
less inflammation, less gas. What are we getting here? Like, where are we going with this?
Yeah, that's a great question. It could be like absolutely less gas. Like for me, when I eat some plant proteins, like let's not, maybe it's TMI. The digestibility doesn't go that well, but I think absolutely, I think less gas, more absorbed. But if you think about just in general abundance, right? Or let's say, look at sustainability challenges in our food supply chain as it stands today. Like the human body basically operates as a mass balance, right? So you eat something, some of the things that you eat get absorbed by the body, the other things that you don't absorb get excreted. And if you eat something that is less bioavailable or has nutrients that are less bioavailable, you need to eat more of it in order to get those nutrients, right? Because it just doesn't get absorbed by the body and you continue to excrete it. If that's an issue with our current food system, which it is, you need to eat more and more in order to get your recommended daily intake of your essential nutrients. But if you were to switch to something that is more bioavailable or more digestible, you can actually reduce your consumption. And you're starting to see that trend right now with more and more people taking all kinds of GLP-1 inducing supplements or medicals.
Okay.
Where portion sizes might shrink, but that means that the nutrient density or the bioavailability of those portion sizes needs to increase. And so I think what we're starting to see is that digestibility and availability of essential nutrients is going to become more critical. And it seems that RubisCO, based on the data that we have, is in a right position there. Yeah.
And that's really interesting, right? Because I believe the knowledge around RubisCO and all the special properties it has been known since the 1970s.
Yeah. If not longer, I think you can even go to the 40s. I think there were already some.
Yeah, and so you're talking about GLP kind of injection, which is really popular right now in the last couple of years. And it's requiring certain changes in diets and perspectives. But my question really is, what did you see? Like before all this stuff was going on in the food supply chain, what did you see that made you curious and interested in this pretty, to be honest, obscure knowledge, right? It wasn't like you were vegan your life, that you were going through some personal health issues, or you sought this out of some curiosity. And so what were you out looking for? And how did you get this really obscure knowledge?
Yeah, good question. Like sometimes ignorance is a blessing, Manan, I think. But I think on a larger scheme, like Moritz and I, we've known each other for 16 years. We've been good friends, always contemplated starting a business together. He was working in investment banking. I was working in agricultural commodity trading. And I think we evolved from looking into, let's say, mobile payment systems to software to, okay, let's try to find something that leaves the world in a better place. renewable energy could be an interesting way, but it's also pretty commoditized, many horses in the race. So what's the actual disruption you can have there? And then we landed on agriculture or agri-food. And like our take on it is that like almost every industry in society has been operating from a perspective to improve and get better and innovate. And if you think about agriculture and food, like it's not, right? It's just so conservative where we have, yes, we've optimized, yes, we've mechanized, but fundamentally we're still growing the same crops in the exact same way.
Whereas World War II in the United States was a big catalyst for the modern food supply chain.
Yeah, but
right?
Once again, more from it. Like I think we found ways to produce fertilizer more efficiently. We found ways to apply breeding and gene editing in order to make the same crops be more productive. But I think if you think about the relationship or the synergetic relationship between food and, let's say, healthcare, I think on healthcare we've always been quite innovative to find new drugs. But if you look at it from a food perspective, like how often are we looking for ingredients or food compounds that make the human body healthier? Like I have yet to see some like disruptive innovation in that space.
I have a lot of friends, specifically people who are older, my parents, who are now thinking about health span versus lifespan, and that plays a role here. But what you're making me think about when you're talking about kind of the healthcare system and the food system is, for a lot of people, medicine becomes food, right? Why can't it be food becomes your medicine? And I think what you're talking about is something that I think is really interesting. And if we can redesign our food supply system, our ingredients, to something like Lemna, which is, again, for the audience listening, this is readily available in nature. We haven't even gotten into kind of the nature of Lemna, but this is the creation that comes from our ground, right? And so I just think there's something really interesting about when food can become our medicine, which can challenge a lot of our perspectives.
Yeah, I think so. I'm maybe going to get some slack for this or whatever, but I think if you think about like I think it was like a Greek philosopher, Hypothemus or something like that, that said, "Let food be thy medicine." And I think we've completely moved away from that. And I think, I think there's over 30,000 different plants in the plant kingdom, right? And we're only consuming 170, which, if you think about it, is pretty interesting because those 170 probably were identified a couple hundred years ago. And with today's analytical knowledge and science, we should be able to identify, let's say, discover a couple of plants that are healthier and better for us than the ones that we're consuming today. But I think we've just been like in a deadlock where we just are stuck in a system, grow the same thing over and over again. And just, I think right now we're running into the limit. So coming back to like why, so running into the limitations of the existing agricultural supply chain being one of the largest contributors to climate change, affecting the stability and consistency and quality of our agricultural supply chain. We're starting to see diseases breaking out all over the world. Look at eggs at the moment. And then I think one of the biggest things is the geopolitical risk that's going to come with our agricultural supply.
Let's go into this a little bit more, right? I think what we've heard so far is you're someone who had a desire to start their own business, right? And now you think you have a really unique idea to build that business around, but you're still on the early steps of making Plantible a national brand that everyone can see or read on a label. And so as you're moving into production, we'll get back to that. But I like to continue the thread that you're on, which is to jump into the problems with our current food systems. And so teach us something. Teach the audience something that you have identified in the current food system. And maybe to direct you a little bit in kind of the answers, what are some of the assumptions that you find people being most challenged by, that you challenge with when you think about what Plantible Foods is doing? Or do you believe we have oversimplified or misrepresented sustainable food systems?
Yeah, I think like my hot take is it's all about taste, right? I think we talk a lot about cost and skill, but given the size of the food industry, cost should become all within reason. Don't get me wrong, but cost should relatively later become a topic of discussion, right? I think if you start to create something that's absolutely delicious, but might be 2 or 3 times more expensive than the status quo, I am quite sure you can still build a very healthy, successful business. And let's take 2 examples, right? The first one that really triggered my take was Red Bull. Red Bull, if you think about everything that's going on in, let's say, the sustainable food space, right? Whether it's cultivated meat, whether it's plant-based foods, there's a lot of concern about consumers talking about that it's processed, Frankenstein foods, whatever jargon they're using these days. But if you think about Red Bull, so this Austrian guy took it from Thailand, moved it to Europe. It was illegal everywhere. It tastes horrible. It smells horrible. It's 3 times more expensive than any other soda on the shelf. There were like rumors going around that it contained bull testicle extract. And it's one of the most successful.
Bull testicle extract. Okay.
Yes.
So that's what made the bull red. I got it. Okay, it's good just to flag.
Yeah,
okay.
I think it was like it contained taurine, and people didn't know what taurine was. So like Taurus, probably bull testicle extract. Probably that's how the story went. But so in the end, it's one of the most successful consumer brands that we've had over the past couple of decades. And so for me, what it shows, going back to the consumer perception, is like, yes, there can be, like, people argue about, is it clean label, does it contain ingredients, but if it tastes delicious, or if it gives some kind of functional benefit, in the case of Red Bull, it gives people energy, you can change the way consumers operate. And I think it's the same way if you think about, let's say, electric vehicles. You had the Nissan Leaf and you had the Tesla, but the Tesla has become a way more successful electric vehicle than the Nissan Leaf for 2 reasons: better design and perhaps a little bit faster speed. And so it offered consumers a better value prop. I think what we've seen in food, my take is too much focus on cost and price. And yes, if you want to hit, let's say, the mainstream consumers in the world, sure, that's super critical. But if you're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar market, even if you cater to 1%, you already have quite some nice sales there, right? Mm. And similar on the thing, like sustainability is a nice to have, right? And yes, you can shout that, but just focus on creating something that's delicious and joyful for the consumer. So I think that's really what I learned over the past couple of years. I think we can talk a lot about, let's say, clean label. We can talk a lot about, let's say, cost of production and sustainability and all these things. But I think most importantly is that the product or the ingredient that we produce adds value to our customer and their consumer.
I mean, I think you've said this in other interviews and in conversation with me, is that you're not trying to compete with other plant-based proteins, right? You're actually competing and aiming to remove chickens and cows from the food supply system. That is controversial. That is not something that many people want to hear, especially because your biggest facility is in Texas, which used to be, or it still is, one of the largest cow producing states in the country, right? Or consumers, at least. How about that? So let's just consider on the consumer side the significant role animal proteins have in providing us the desired textures and functional properties. How will duckweed literally replace them on a large scale?
Yeah, I think it's like Lemna or Ruby. It's a piece to the puzzle, right? So I think there's a lot of stuff that needs to go into it. So I think our main focus is, if you think about a lot of animal-based products, think about, let's say, dairy or eggs, are used in a wide variety of food applications, right? So obviously bakery, confectionery goods, dairy products from yogurts, and the proteins often just play a functional role in those systems, right? Where they emulsify, they gel, they foam, and they create the textures that consumers enjoy to eat. And I think that's really where Plantible is currently operating at. Like, where can we replace those functional proteins in our food supply chain so that we help customers?
Can you give us some examples?
Think about, let's say, what's a good example? Like a macaron, maybe it's the first thing that comes to mind. So a macaron, you use egg white to create, let's say, a meringue, and to create, let's say, the puff that you see in the macaron shells. A lot of proteins lack that same functionality. What we see with Ruby is that it often outperforms eggs in those similar systems. And so our customers can use less of the Ruby in order to replace all of the egg whites in those systems.
So the eggs provide certain properties.
Yes.
Other alternatives to eggs don't, what would happen to that
No.
meringue? It would just get flat. It would taste horrible.
Yes,
It
for
would be watery.
example.
What would happen?
Yeah, it could taste very grainy or gritty.
Mm.
It can deflate. It might not maintain the same texture or aerated state, all of those things. So that's where Ruby really plays a unique role. Or you can think about cakes, pound cakes for that matter, where eggs play both a emulsifying role in binding, let's say, the fat inside of the batter, but then also provides a structuring role to set the cake and make sure that it maintains its shape, right? So it plays, let's say, a dual role in those systems. And that's where Ruby also, once again, can outperform these eggs in those systems where sometimes you need to use half of less of our protein compared to the amount of eggs that you use in order to achieve a similar texture. And so I think those are like the applications that we're primarily focused on. And then there are some plant-based meat companies that also use our product to replace, let's say, all of the synthetic ingredients, right? So what we've seen over the past decades is that the food industry has gone through or moved towards a lot of use of these hydrocolloids, these ultra-processed ingredients, these synthetic ingredients that are now showing to cause a lot of, let's say, health issues because maybe the initial intent of consumption rates was lower than the way they're being used today, but they've just been grandfathered into our food system. And that's where Ruby can actually provide, let's say, a natural replacement. And then how duckweed then plays a role, obviously, that we believe that duckweed is the most cost-efficient and scalable source of RubisCO production at scale. And so I think that's where we really try to leverage Lemna to make an impact. And
I actually want to take you back a little bit. I want to jump into what we've not done yet or talked about is the technology and the biology, right? That Plantible has really, it's been 7 years, right? And it's not just being a farmer and growing a plant. Talk to us a little bit about the insights around the technology, the biology, and really noting some specific terms, downstream processing, upstream processing, and then ultimately how that affects, for all of you out there, this is one of my favorite words about is organoleptic. Tell us a little bit more about the technology, right? And the biology of what you've developed and the fact that you have thousands of square feet of hoop houses now in Texas. Like what's going on there?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like Lemna, when we started, right? So on the one hand, protein extraction, the way it is currently commercially applied is unfavorable to maximize functionality and nutritional quality of proteins, specifically when applying it to RubisCO. So I think if you want to unlock RubisCO at scale in its native and nutritional state while removing, let's say, green and grassy notes that might otherwise come along with it, we really had to develop a completely new process to extract the protein from leafy greens or duckweed specifically. And
is there any other industry that we can think about when you're talking about this? Is there anything else that we can put in our minds? Is it breweries? Is it winemaking? Is anything else that's done this in parallel, or is this a brand new thing that you had to figure out?
So the way we operated is we worked backwards from, okay, what does a 5 kiloton or let's say a large commercial facility look like, right? So what kind of existing equipment might be available at that scale that we could use to extract or isolate proteins in a native form? And with that knowledge, we worked backwards to just create like a funnel as to like what we can do on bench scale or in the lab. Because obviously, like when you're in the lab, there's infinite amount of solutions that you can do, right? But that doesn't mean that they're all scalable. So we immediately from the beginning, we took maybe too much of a Dutch logical approach as to, okay, what can we do on the bench? And as that induced at the same time, a lot of, let's say, frugal, creative solutions that we developed. But I think that's how we started, right? So really work backwards from what is available at scale and like, what does that mean on the bench? Because like in the end, how we thought about our business was we have to do so many biological, biochemical innovations that if we also have to focus on developing machinery and equipment, we might shoot ourselves in the foot when it comes to scalability. So we rather design our biochemical and biological systems about, let's say, the infrastructure or let's say the machinery and equipment that's already available at scale, than if we also have to add that to the amount of work that we have to do. Because we were more thinking, okay, how can we balance the scalability of our venture with our ability to fundraise and with our ability to develop, let's say, scientific solutions. And so that's the primary constraint that we set ourselves. Like funny anecdote is we were, one of the things that we were looking into was like a bag centrifuge or a spin dryer. And then we could rent one in the lab for $3,000 a month. Or you go onto Amazon and you buy bath clothing drying machine for $180, aka called the Panda. I hope I get some sponsorship money out of this. The Panda on Amazon, and you buy a vacuum cleaning bag, and you have the same solution, right? Only at a tenth of the cost, right? So I think those were the type of things that we're trying to do and trying to innovate with. But that's really how it started. And then you have to think about, let's say, how do you maximize your yield, but how do you minimize the amount of impurities in your final product? And so how do you maximize the quality? So I think that's the one thing. And then on the upstream side, it sounds pretty easy, right? So you grow a plant, duckweed, it grows everywhere, it's a weed, but there's a difference between growing it and maximizing growth or growth potential, right? And so that is obviously a complete.
And the difference is cost and time, obviously.
Cost, time, a lot of things, right? Yes, it grows everywhere, and that's a fair statement. But what does it do to the composition? What does it do to, let's say, the actual growth rate, right? And so to your point, what's the yield? What is your return on investment? At what scale in the way you grow it? And I think our approach, once again, there was agriculture is operating at a certain cost level, right? And it has a certain ceiling as to what things may cost. And so you can come with very fancy cultivation systems, but if that blasts through the cost ceiling of agricultural production, you really need to make up for it somewhere else. And our analysis is that Lemna plays a critical role in unlocking RubisCO at scale, but most of the magic happens when you convert the biomass into your final product, which is where you have most of the levers to optimize the quality of your final product. So if that's where you want to have most of your degrees of freedom to maximize the quality, then you really need to think about, let's say, how do you optimize the cost structure of your upstream process? Because I think when we talk to investors or other people, when we say, oh, we now have a 100-acre facility, their mind is blown. 100 acres sounds like an enormous amount of space. Once you come to Texas, Manan, and you see the space, you see what 100 acres actually means. It's like nothing, right? We're part of like 20,000 acre ranch. And so if you look over 20,000 acres, like 100 acres is really doesn't. And so for us, like land is not a rate limiting step, right? Like land is abundantly available, specifically because we don't need arable land. And so from the biological improvements and the biochemical improvements, it's really like, how do you set the right boundaries to a certain extent to still allow for a lot of freedom and innovation, but at the same time also be able to cross-check and validate, let's say, what some of these solutions, how they might impact your overall unit economics at scale. And I think that is how we've always tried to build our business and grow the company.
So I want to build, I got a couple of questions. I got to turn the car a little bit here for those that are driving. We're talking a lot about Texas, right? 100-acre facility. There's some fun stuff going on in Texas right now with your Lemna strain. Yeah. Can you talk about what did you discover and who are you talking to about this?
Oh, man. I think first and foremost, I do want to, because I'm not sure who's listening to this. Maybe it's just the three of us. But anyway, so just to rectify, I think for us, we're in rural Texas, West Texas, which is where we have our first of a kind demo plant, the Ranchito. And we didn't know what to expect. Like first and foremost, both Mort and I were from the Netherlands. We already moved from Amsterdam to California, different culture, different environment. And then we went to rural West Texas, which is obviously a completely different region as well. And so we didn't really know what to expect. But I think for us so far to date, we've been very fortunate to have been surrounded by people in Texas that have been incredibly positive and well-receiving about our intentions. And yeah, I'll never forget, a couple months in, we put the stakes in the ground. I went to the local cafeteria, which is like a trailer with a kitchen in there. There was a guy sitting with a t-shirt, "Don't California, my Texas." He had his revolver on the outside of his pants. I came in, he's like, "Are you from Plantible?" I was wearing merch, so it was hard to say no. Right? So I was like, okay, He's like, it's also, I don't look like a West Texan. So it's just in multiple ways, it was difficult. But and I said like, yeah, we're from Plantible. He's like, oh my God, thank you so much for coming to West Texas. If there's anything you need, please let us know how we can help. And so what you're referring to is that, the duckweed family consists of over 1,000 different strains, all with different properties, compositions, growth rates, etc. And so we've discovered like a novel strain for which we need to get, or we've developed like this novel strain for which we need to get, let's say, regulatory approval to grow it in Texas. And the regulatory approval is primarily like a permit that we need. Anyway, about a year ago, I sent an email to the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, ignorant as I am, and I just got, no, this is not allowed. I'm like, okay. Anyway, later that year, so late last year, we hired a lobbyist. I guess that's how you roll, right? So we hired a lobbyist. Got a couple of meetings with a bunch of representatives, senators, congressmen to see whether there would be interest in supporting Plantible in growing this new strain in Texas. And what I found incredibly surprising was that in the state of Texas, we've also met with the governance team, and basically their slogan is, we want to move at the speed of business. So when we pitch, hey, we are trying to replace synthetic, ultra-processed ingredients, trying to create cleaner, healthier food products, everybody was on board. A lot of excitement. So now we got a bunch of letters of support from all of these politicians, and actually now we seem to be on track to get like a permit by the end of this year to grow this new strain in our Texas facility. And so I think, coming back to what you just said, I think like just our efforts in Texas so far have been very favorable, and I think we're also starting to see, let's say, the support from the politicians in that state to continue to thrive and build out Plantible, which has been great.
I love that. I think there's so much there, which is one, the adaptability of you and your co-founder, Moritz, the willingness to tolerate adversity, and then also receive a whole new community and understand that you are joining them, they're not joining you. And that it's really important to appreciate the assimilation that comes with going to a new place.
Yeah.
I love that. And kudos to West Texas counties, Texas, for making this happen. I think this is what business looks like when innovation is possible. And so I'm going to bring this to another question. I just want to expand on this a little bit. It's 2025, and we are going to have a shift on our food with RFK Jr. being appointed. What can you do to give us a better shot at getting what we need to stay healthy and lower the price? Like what can Plantible do to fulfill that clean label mandate, which a lot of Europe has had for certain ingredients?
So I think the reason why we went to the United States in the first place, right? So I think obviously Europe has, let's say, perhaps a more rigorous, for good and for bad on both sides, right? So Europe might have a way more rigorous and diligent regulatory approval process than the United States, which also slows down a lot of innovation, once again, on, let's say, how can we launch better ingredients for consumers in Europe, right? But in the United States, on the other hand, I think there's obviously less controls in place. And so if I think about what the new administration is trying to do, like creating healthier and better for you food products, I think we should all be advocating for better, healthier products, right? I think coming from Europe to the United States, one of the most fascinating things that I found is like the abundance of sugar or processed like ingredients or ultra processed ingredients or synthetic ingredients used in commercial food products here in the United States. You don't really see that in Europe. Actually, a lot of these ingredients have a specific labeling where they're categorized in the E number group, which is basically a red flag to every consumer in Europe. But here it's way less. And this brings me back to the whole clean label discussion, like how much do consumers really care? I don't think much, because they're just uneducated. But I think creating healthier, better for you products is absolutely critical. And I think the way we're trying to help or support with that mission with Plantible is to really leverage the functionality that Lemna and Ruby can bring, and thereby hopefully enable food companies to reduce their reliance on all of these synthetically produced hydrocolloids that are showing more and more negative impacts on people's health, right? So there's more links between the use of these synthetic gums and hydrocolloids and diabetes, colon cancer. And so if there's a way that you can use natural ingredients like Ruby to replace those synthetic emulsifiers and binders, I think that will put us in a great step in the right direction. I think that's super exciting. I think animal proteins, one of the issues there is that a lot of them are considered to be allergens, create some kind of inflammation. With Ruby, we have done various studies to look at its allergenicity profile. It didn't cross-react with any of the known allergens, obviously.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's very positive, very favorable, and it makes sense if you think about like how many people like actually, not let's say mentally, are allergic to leafy greens, right? But I think generally it's not really a big issue. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities there to create a healthier food system. So like we perceive it as a positive change for us. I do want to recognize that I think healthy eating in the US is already more affordable than, let's say, fast food, right? If you go to a grocery store and you want to buy fruits, vegetables, it is cheaper than if you go to, let's say, a Shake Shack or whatsoever. But I do think it's like the convenience aspect that is a bottleneck there that still needs to be addressed, right? So if we can provide, let's say, the toolkits to food companies to create healthier food products that are also more convenient for consumers to consume. I mean,
we could have a whole other podcast conversation around, I think, the consumerism of food and how that's going to change and how that's been changing globally. But I want to go back to something you said and bringing this global mindset forward, which is, I know Plantible envisions building a copy and paste, in quotes, sustainable food supply chain around the world. What needs to happen? What needs to be true to achieve this global vision? And where are you in that journey?
Yeah, so I think what we're trying to do is if we look at the Ranchito, we see that as a first module, so to say, that hopefully can be duplicated locally, but also internationally, right? It's, for lack of a better term, to really develop like this IKEA blueprint as to like how to build, let's say, a modular Lemna and RubisCO manufacturing system. I think there's a couple of things that need to be true in order for that to become a reality. And there's another element to it. It's like, how much do we want to do ourselves and how much do we want to work with, let's say, cooperatives or state governments to license out maybe some of the infrastructure or technology and thereby accelerate the decentralization. I think first and foremost, most important thing is, do people want to buy the product, right? And how much do they want to buy and for what price? I think that's absolutely critical. I think that's de-risking number one. De-risking number two is, can you operate consistently and reproducibly at scale? Can you showcase that you can do the same, can you produce the same product in the same quality over and over and over again from a food safety and overall performance perspective? And then I think third, obviously, can you make money doing so at commercial scale? So I think those three things need to be true in order to really truly take this module and duplicate it locally and internationally over and over again. And so if you look at where we are today, I think on the one hand, we've been very fortunate that we've never, this is good and bad, but we've never been able to catch up with demand. So we're always running behind and we seem to often be the bottleneck in delivering enough product. So that's good, right? Then if we look at, can we produce the same product over and over again at scale? I think what we did at Plantible is always took a little bit more of a leap of faith, for lack of a better term again. I think like when we raised our seed round, when we raised our pre-seed round, we developed our lab process in our Breaking Bad trailer in San Diego. Then when we raised our seed round, we lived on our farm to build out a pilot plant and showcase that we could actually produce this product at semi-industrial scale using the smallest size of commercial equipment available. And then obviously when we raised our Series A back in 21, we started to build out the Ranchito, and we've now been operating this for a year and a half. And so I think that has really allowed us to showcase and optimize for all of, let's say, some of these scaling issues and these consistency issues, and has really put us on a trajectory that over the past couple of months, we've been shipping out the same product over and over again as validated by our customers. So that's great. And then third, can we make money doing this? And we're on the verge of validating this. I think we have great proof points. We have good validation. It's now a matter of doing it reproducibly over and over again so that we can really underwrite the profitability of our system. And once we hit that, we should be ready to accelerate expansion locally and internationally. So I think we're on the right journey. I don't want to jinx anything, but I think those are the three things that we deem to be most important to fuel expansion. And I think so far so good.
I feel like you're dropping some really powerful nuggets here for even the beginning of the conversation. You talked a little bit about the starting point of Plantible was what's the system that we want to have in place and how do we get there? And now you're telling us even more about how you've iteratively went through all your financing rounds and hit milestones. Maybe the advice is already there, but if you could offer one key lesson or an unexpected insight for other entrepreneurs, what would come to your mind? What's that perspective? And you've raised a lot of money too, and the industry has not looked good the last number of years around you. A lot of failure has occurred.
Yeah, don't jinx it. But I don't know really how extrapolatable this is to other industries. I hope it is. I think what I have learned about the food industry and maybe the investment landscape around it is I think food, what we need to recognize about food is that it has a driver that's very unique and that no other industry really has, which is the flavor or the taste element of it. And that is incredibly personal and cultural, I would say. And that is so unique to food that I don't think there's a lot of other industries where that is applicable on a similar level. And so what I mean with that also, when like the critical thing that I learned, and I think what I always had difficulty with as a founder is that maybe at first sight, our technology, as you rightfully called it, was, like really like the dark horse or the oddball in the group of food tech companies. We were not like on a first level basis, we were not the cool deep tech, biotech type of comparable, right, to all of the other companies in the space. Like lab grown meat sounds super fancy, or like precision fermentation. So that sounds
Mission Barnes
cool.
just got FDA approval. Let's not.
Yeah.
Let's
We'll see what that means, right, from a consumer adoption perspective. But I think so. That brings me to the critical learning that I think like technology sustainability is second tier, right? In the end, what counts most, if you want to build a successful food ingredient business or a food tech company or ag tech company, I think you need to produce something that consumers love and want to eat all the time, every day of the week. And if you're not doing that, if your value proposition is it's cool technology, it's cool sustainability, I don't think they care. I think what they truly care about is, do I want to put this in my mouth and chew, or whatever? I'm not going to use all kinds of other words, like chew, put it in my mouth, consume it every day for the rest of my life. I think that is the critical component here. And I think that is the main learning that I've had, that you can have cool technology, you can have cool sustainability stories, but if people don't want to consume it, nothing else matters. Yeah.
You're making me think about a scene out of Gladiator where he goes, "Are you not entertained?"
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, that's what everyone wants. Whether they watch a movie, they're eating something, they want to be entertained by what they're doing. And
100%.
I think that applies honestly to every single business. It's got to fulfill something that keeps them engaged and entertained. And so food.
Don't fall in love with your own science and technology, right? Don't fall in love with your own tech, because it's just going to destroy you. I think like in general, I think in climate tech as a whole, I think there's a way for people to shift their mind. And you can obviously complain that there needs to be government support. Absolutely, there needs to be government support, right? But I think you just focus on the customer first, right? If you deliver a product that elevates somebody's life, all right? And once again, going back to food, I'm a firm believer that it can be 2, 3, 4 times more expensive. If it's more delicious, or if it gives a unique experience or a value to a consumer, you will find your product market fit. And that gives you the opportunity then to continue to iterate and iterate. I think finding your beachhead market, gaining, like with software businesses and whatnot, finding your beachhead market getting that traction, getting that repeat purchase going is so critical. And I think we've often overlooked that in food and immediately start to think about, let's say, commodity priced meat products, commodity priced dairy products. Whereas like, no, we don't need that from the beginning, right? Yes, maybe your second or third or fourth iteration of your product, but your first iteration, just focus on your first wave of consumers, the sticky consumers that love your product because of the value that it adds, and then iterate.
Well, there's a scrappiness to what you're saying too, right? There's a component where you alluded to it earlier, I brought it up. You had to do some things along the journey that is quite unique. We jokingly and lovingly call it today the Breaking Bad trailers at your R&D facility in the early days of Plantible. What was it like, right? It was, you had your home and your workplace, your social life, your work life. There was nothing separating the two. Like, what was that like? And what did that teach you about yourself?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Like Moritz and I, but like going back to when we were still in the Netherlands, we had cushiony jobs. Everything was fine. Climbing the ladder. I think both long-term relationships back then. And we said, hey, we were like 27 at the time. We're like, let's go. And let's take a leap of faith. If we don't do it now, when will we actually start a company together? So quit our jobs, found ourselves knees deep in like a deserted greenhouse in the eastern part of the Netherlands, surrounded by duckweed, full of excitement. Realized we had to go to the United States. Realized that it was only the two of us that wanted to go to the United States. So we went as two single guys to the United States and suddenly found ourselves on the other side of the planet in San Diego or in Southern California. And I think what we realized back then is that I think, shit, we're here, we have this facility, what are we going to do? And we went to the United States with a mission. And I sometimes think also that, at least for me personally, has made it difficult to fully immigrate and acclimate locally. Because in the end, like in my mind, I came here to build a business and to be extraordinarily successful and impactful with Plantible. And so if I think about, let's say, building friendships or personal relationships, yes, it's nice, but I find it difficult personally to make that work if I feel that Plantible deserves to be prioritized. And so I think, what have I learned about myself? I think on the one hand, what I found extremely powerful about going into this journey is the ability to be alone and be comfortable to only have to rely on yourself and realizing that you can survive by being alone, right? That you don't, like, it's scary to not have your support system around you, that you not have your parents or your family or your friends around you. I think that that really has given me a sense of power that I can conquer the world no matter what. I can survive and thrive by myself. But at the same time, I'm also recognizing that the journey is, I could have chosen perhaps like a less difficult road maybe to build a company, and I sometimes struggle with the fact that the amount of sacrifices that I had to make in order to get to where I am today. But at the same time, I'm also incredibly proud of Moritz, myself, and the team that we've built around us and the accomplishments that we've made. So I think, coming back to summarize in a nutshell, I think what has it learned about myself? I think, ability to be alone and ability to thrive alone, I feel like has become one of my superpowers, which sounds sad, but I perceive it as a very positive trait. But I think also sometimes I recognize the sacrifices I have had to make in order to get where I am today. And that is still something that I struggle with from time to time. So, yeah.
The whole idea, the concept of believing in aliens is identifying and celebrating people that leave their comfort zone and move into the learning zone, and that incredible curiosity that comes from it and growth. And so on a very personal level, I find that part of your story to be deeply relatable. And whether that's leaving your home country or leaving your town, leaving your job, leaving a relationship, I think we can see stories of ourselves in all that, right? It's that comfort zone that we have to break through to get to a learning zone. And sometimes we may go too far and get to the danger zone. But I think that's where appreciating the boundaries is really powerful. I guess as a final question to bring this all home, how do you view yourself in the mindset of being an alien? What do you believe about it? And what is that equipping you with today that oftentimes someone who's not an alien, and that could be anyone leaving a town, may not benefit from?
Um, it's hard. I would say it's. I think it's a personal question, right? I think it's deeply personal because I do believe that every person is different and everybody's aspirations are different in life. I think I feel for myself by being an alien, entering new cultures, being exposed to new environments and new people, I think has developed me on a personal level, on an entrepreneurial level, on a business level, on a professional level, whatever you call it. I think, and it has really given me, like, coming from the Netherlands, you're like in a bubble. You think the Netherlands, for whatever reason, even though it's a tiny country, is the center of the universe. And then I remember coming here in the first 2 years, what is this place, right? How does this country operate? But after 2 years, you're like, oh, there are some really good things about how they approach things here, and there are ways that are incredibly unique. And I wish, like, we would adopt some of that mindset and thinking in the Netherlands, and vice versa. So I think for me personally, it's just, it has stimulated my intellectual curiosity. It also partially fulfilled my intellectual curiosity, and I think it has developed me more as a whole person as to like how I look at the world and how I perceive the opportunities that are out there, and also how I myself can play a role in some of those opportunities. So I think that has been really, really good as being an alien. And I think once again, I feel like what I've like the superpower that I feel that I've developed is just that going to the other side of the world with basically no money to survive or do things that you were able to do back in your home country, not having that support system around you, and then being somewhat successful in your endeavors just really gives you that trust in your own abilities to do what you want to do in life, continue to go on a journey, but also not to, it also gives you the opportunity that, like, hey, if I'm on a path that I don't like, I have the opportunity to take a different route, right? And throw myself in the unknown and come out. And I think that has just been a superpower that I've gradually been developing since I've become a non-resident alien, but that I'm super, super happy about.
Tony, I just want to say thank you. We learned a lot today, right? We learned about the perspectives of leaving everything in the comfort behind, to taking on $1 trillion industry with a lot of incremental iterative steps, to learning about yourself, superpower being alone and being by yourself, and the power that I think ultimately drives the belief you have in yourself. And certainly as we look at the world today and we think about food and the role it can have on our health, I'm really optimistic and hopeful that Plantible has a huge role to play in how we get to enjoy the taste of food while not suffering its consequences to our bodies. And I think we oftentimes overlook some of those things and unfortunately wake up to them too late. And all we live is on pills every morning. And so cheers to you. Thank you, Tony, who I first met as a founder, then became a farmer, and is now a friend. So thank you. And again, for all those listening to you, I hope this podcast reflects that unique perspective that one can gain when they leave what they know behind and challenge status quo. With that, we'll close out Believe in Aliens. Thank you.